Khalistani separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, the chief of the banned outfit Sikhs for Justice, has been booked by the NIA over his latest viral video threatening the passengers flying and Air India Airlines with a global blockade and closure of the operations of the airline from the 19th of November. This comes after Canadian Member of Parliament Chandra Arya on Monday raised concerns about the threat posed by pro-Khalistani elements and fervently sought intervention from the authorities. Arya expressed his distress over recent disruptive incidents and vandalization of Hindu temples by Sikh extremists and said that the group now wants to create trouble at a temple in Surrey. The Khalistani nexus in Canada has grown over the years as the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, instead worries about blaming India time and again over the killing of a Khalistani terrorist, Nijjar. Now that the Canadian MP Chandra Arya also raised concerns of the growing spider web of the nexus, it's time Trudeau wakes up and smells the roses. We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, former diplomat. Also with us is Mr. Harinder Sikka, author and Sikh community voice, joining us on the show. Alok Bansal, foreign affairs expert, joins us on the show as well. Professor D.K. Giri, international affairs expert, on the program as well. Pathikrit Pine, international affairs expert, also joins us on the show as well. Pathikrit, I'll begin with you. I hope you can hear me. Pathikrit? Yeah, well, somebody has raised their voice, but I'm not sure whether it's going to get through the thick head of Mr. Justin Trudeau. He's not only, in fact, blatantly targeted India for having some sort of a connection with Nijjar's death, but hasn't done zilch about the kind of threats which have emanated out of Canada. He hasn't done much about, the community, the Indian community, which constantly fears living in Canada because of this kind of a threat. Do you think that more people in the Canadian government need to realize what's going on over here? It's not about bilateral ties between India and Canada. Now it's come to a point, where regular life could be interrupted if these threats are not dealt with.
Vineet, good evening. First of all, I think there's a sheer disconnect between what Justin Trudeau government is doing and what in general people of that place, suffer from or they feel, because we have seen in many of the NewsX programs the traction that it gets from people in Canada. Many of them have actually voiced worries, because if you look at somebody when it threatens Air India flights, it doesn't matter whether that person, what religion that person belongs to, or which part of the world it belongs to. A threat to an airline, a threat to explode or blast an airline, it's same whether it's done by an Al-Qaeda or anybody. So there is palpable fear. And secondly, because of, I think the deep state of Canada is heavily invested, as I said in one of the previous programs, in many of these organizations. But, these organizations which actually function through, there's a deep nexus between the organized crime syndicates that have come up. There's a narco trade that is there. There's an issue of extortion, and of course, the control of the religious seminaries or the gurdwaras in there. So frankly, what is happening right now is that there is so much of money involved that there are factionalism, there are cartels which are getting formed, and there are invariably rivalries happening. I think many of them have become like warlords. They are, even the deep state of Canada, if they are invested into it, they're finding it difficult to contain them, but they can't disown them entirely, maybe for several reasons. So frankly, I do not think that Justin Trudeau, just because voices are being raised, he would do anything. Of course, IATA would definitely take into account these threats and would ask the Canadian government to take certain measures. We must not forget that Gurpatwant Singh Pannun also has a dual citizenship, which is the American citizenship. But whether the stand of the Canadian government, whether the stand of anybody else who comes to Canada, if and case, in any case, he loses the election, I don't think, that's a question mark as to how much they would change. Frankly speaking, the issue when it comes to these separatist organizations, that has become, Canada has become a safe haven for many of these organizations. It's not just these elements who are going from India and settling down there and raising the anti-India voice. There are these concerns that has been voiced by the Bangladeshi government as well about people who have been involved in the assassination of Mujibur Rahman and who got a safe haven over there. Even the Sri Lankans have voiced their concerns. So I think it's very important, not just about us, but it's also about the G7 countries who tend to claim that they are the epitome of morality, democracy, freedom, liberalism, and securing those values. I don't see much being done by the G7 countries. it would be interesting to see how the Canadian people react. Many of them actually voice their concerns, but discreetly, because they fear retribution, and they fear that if they say too many things openly, there can be, vindictive revenge on them, and the Canadian government, as we know what it is, may not do much. So it's a very difficult situation for some people in Canada. They know how it is turning up, and Canada, if they continue to believe that they can allow all these things to happen and still Canada will remain a secure state, I don't think it will happen like that, because if you allow these snakes to actually thrive in your backyard, someday they will bite you. Today or tomorrow it's going to happen. And it's not just these organizations. There are organizations, elements from Middle East also, who have been given safe haven over there. They are creating lots of problems. There are extremely violent pro-Hamas rallies happening. So it's up to the Canadian people and the government to decide what they want to do. But if it continues to hurt the interest of other countries, especially India, then I think India would have the right to at least voice its concern and take necessary steps, what is important in terms of securing its own sovereignty and its national security. Back to you, Vinny.
Ambassador Kapoor, your perspective on this anomaly that a state like Canada has shown towards India. It's bizarre that enemies of the state continue to prosper and propagate their agendas on Canadian land, and yet there are only a handful of people who endorse India's point of view and the troubleshooting that Canada is not willing to undertake.
Thank you, Vinny, and I appreciate NewsX doing this discussion, because it's very important. A specific threat has been repeatedly mentioned by this Canadian terrorist called Pannun. Now, it is an incitement to violence. It is an incitement to terrorism. There is a track record. Air India flight was bombed many years back. Mostly Canadian citizens died, about 270 of them. This was plus many more, 329 in total. And this was the biggest terrorist attack in the world before 9/11, with the maximum number of casualties. Now, coming down to the granular level, micro level on the ground, it is imperative for the Sikh community in Canada, for the Hindu community in Canada, for the Indian community in Canada, and the other Canadian citizens to raise a voice and have protests against these sort of individuals and demand that the Canadian government thoroughly investigate, prosecute, persecute, and put them behind bars into solitary confinement, so that other people are not encouraged by this sort of statements. Secondly, at the government level, it is shocking that a government of the free world, of the G7 group of countries, of the Five Eyes, member of the Five Eyes, and supposed to be an advanced country, where the world used to say that it has the highest quality of life, is supporting terrorists and letting them thrive on its soil, unhindered, unencumbered. And particularly when they are self-proclaimed terrorists, it's not that people are alluding to them being terrorists, they are themselves proclaiming loudly from the rooftops that they are terrorists. Now, not only that, for the Canadian government and the Canadian Prime Minister to shamelessly look the other way, not only in this case, but in the case of Chinese police, establishments being set up inside Canada, in British Columbia, in Vancouver. Is it the beginning of colonization of Canada by China? I don't know. But for any country to allow these sort of things to happen, to allow their own citizens to be taken away clandestinely for persecution and prosecution, to allow the Chinese police officers to enter the Embassy of Canada in Shanghai to interrogate a Canadian citizen woman who was taken back into China, and thereafter nobody has heard of her. There are umpteen such instances. So, and the list goes on and on. The way they have been supporting self-proclaimed terrorists is something which the world needs to understand, that is it becoming another Pakistan? Is it becoming a rogue state? How can it hold its head high in the international community? And then, to cap it all, it goes crying to 10 other countries, leaderships, that India is troubling us, India is harassing us, India is doing this to us, as if it's a small baby which is being troubled by a big bully. And the facts are just the opposite, that they are giving shelter to terrorists, Canadian citizens, including US citizens. Now, even for the US, it's a big threat. It's not something that they can look the other way, because these things ultimately come to bite back the country which is fostering them, which is supporting them, which is giving them shelter. So for Canada to realize, and for the Canadians to realize, that if they have to give a Khalistan, it is to be in Canada, not in India, because the Sikh community there is, very small numbers support Khalistan firstly. We know that, the whole world knows that. The percentages I was reading somewhere is probably less than 1% of the Sikh community globally which supports Khalistan. And the others who support Khalistan are primarily the ISI, who are bankrupt currently, and they are getting their funding from China and other sources. And any other sources which support that have to be also challenged and highlighted. The drugs is another aspect which is supporting Khalistan. So how do you bring the focus back? Because Khalistan is putting a black mark on the Sikh community unnecessarily. We are all very proud of Sikhs. I have relatives who are Sikhs. I am from Punjab, from Jalandhar, and we are very, very proud of them. They are the backbone of our army. They are the backbone of agriculture. They are being destroyed through drugs, through these sort of political diversions and distractions and disruptions. And all this has to be put an end to. Back to you, Vinny.
Okay, all of this has to be put an end to. Mr. Sikka, what do you make of this tug of war between India and Canada, and why do you think there's only one country out of the two, which by its own accord and by its own common sense is telling the other to do the right thing, but it's Canada that doesn't want to pay any heed?
You see, there's this problem. This man, I think he's a psychopath, Prime Minister Trudeau, and he has recently left a proof in week.
So there's a problem with the audio, sir. So you'll have to join us back again. No, sir. There's a problem with the audio. You'll have to join us back again. Mr. Alok Bansal, Foreign Affairs expert, also with us on the program. Mr. Bansal? Mr. Bansal, if you're there with us.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. What I was trying to say was that Canada has been a country which has been nurturing and sheltering such extremist and terrorist organizations. And in fact, we need to go back. When Kanishka bombing took place, the actions that were taken by Canadian authorities actually are still crying for the world community to look up and see. The fact of the matter is that the perpetrators of that heinous crime were already in the radar scan of the Canadian authorities, but still they did nothing. And even after such a ghastly tragedy was given implementation, no action was taken against anyone. Most of them were left scot-free. Now that raises a lot of questions about as far as the Canadian justice system is concerned, as far as the Canadian police and security agencies are concerned. And today again, we are seeing the same thing reverting back. Canada is trying to create a Frankenstein's monster, and they don't realize that when you create such monsters, they devour you only. And I think Canada needs to be very, very cognizant of this particular fact. And that is what I think we need to tell them. Because this sort of a threat which Mr. Pannun gave, that people should not fly in Air India or something, in any civilized country of the world, for issuing this sort of a security threat, a terrorist would have been arrested. And I think Canada should have taken an action, should have initiated something against him, and have not done so is, I think, a serious violation of international norms.
All right. Professor Giri, Canada has been in violation of international norms, but it really hasn't made much of a difference, despite the extreme action that India took when we were implicated in those false charges of having to do anything with Nijjar's death.
Yeah, India should now turn the table on Canada. But I would make a slight distinction between Canada as a country and the Trudeau as the Prime Minister. That is, the Trudeau's imbecile, incompetent, and controversial leadership that is causing these problems. I mean, entire Canada has a better history and there have been better prime ministers. But be that as it may, it is the time for our country to give it back to him, because he was really going around tom-tomming the world that saying India has killed one of their citizens. But now there is a person in Canada who is giving a threat to an airline where not only Indians fly, but people from other countries fly. So we should demand that this fellow should be arrested and action should be taken. And India should, without losing any time, lodge a strong protest in the United Nations against Justin Trudeau to say that he has to take action and to prove him wrong, because how he was hobnobbing with the terrorists when he came to India with the controversial characters here, and in Canada itself he is failing to take any action. And when a person who was killed there, who died in mysterious circumstances, who was again a dreaded terrorist with a history sheeter, he made a hue and cry. So I think it is our turn to expose Justin Trudeau, prove him wrong, and say that it's against the international law that any country, any citizen in any country should threaten the lives and security of people in any other country. That is not acceptable by international law. So Justin Trudeau is bound to take action, and we'll have to force that upon him. So all these talks about Five Eyes, the ambassador was mentioning, G7 and all, it should be brought to their notice and say that what is happening. You see, and it is not an Indian journalist or Indian politician saying, it is released by a lawmaker in Canada itself. And so there is no doubt about the veracity of this allegation, and India should use that without losing it promptly and expose Justin Trudeau. So this is a time to give it back to him. Thank you. Back to you, Vinit.
Right. Let's rope in Mr. Sikka again. Hopefully we can hear him at this point in time. Mr. Sikka?
Can you hear me?
No, sir. So there's something wrong with the audio. There's something perhaps wrong with the mic that you're using, sir. Perhaps try connecting on a different device. We can't use your audio in that particular state. I'm going to go back to Pathikrit, who's still with us. Pathikrit, what should India do at this point in time? We have tried everything, but Canada seemed to be unrelenting in the guise of free speech and liberal values, extreme liberal values. They seem to be, in fact, gutting the glory that democracies have, taken so long to establish and, create a pattern that is also bad precedent for other countries.
Well, I'm sure Indian government is doing, quite a few good things so far as this is concerned, and I don't have any recommendation to give to the government of India. It has been doing a phenomenal job in terms of exposing the hypocrisy of the Canadians. I think only thing that I feel it should be done a little more is to show the mirror to the G7 countries, because it seems somewhere that you have different yardsticks when it comes to other countries and a different one when it comes to G7. Imagine somebody giving a threat like what this Pannu guy gave. Had that guy been somewhere in South Asia, the G7 countries and their media would have gone gung-ho over this. And look at the stoic silence which all of these G7 countries and Five Eyes lackeys of US maintains on this issue. I think the manner in which Dr. S. Jaishankar exposed the Europeans by saying that Europe must come out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problem. I think something similar must be told time and again to the rest of the world, and to let them understand, the hypocrisy of the West on many issues, including this one. I'm sure there are other things the government of India is doing which I am not aware of and we should not talk about. But I have no recommendation to give, and let me tell you, I am very, very happy with the manner in which government of India has handled this issue. I don't think we need to overdo this, and the best thing is that the Prime Minister doesn't reply to what Justin Trudeau says. It is being replied by the External Affairs Minister, because I don't think the Prime Minister needs to respond to that chap called Justin Trudeau. I think this guy is desperate for attention, and Canada doesn't understand that in today's era, the way there's a fundamental dynamic shift in the world, whether it is on Ukraine, Canada, Russia conflict, or whether it is in Middle East. I think many countries look up to India in terms of what India does, or which side is India on, or what steps India take. But I don't think anybody will ask Justin Trudeau, and rightfully so, that he should not be asked. So frankly speaking, I think India is doing enough. Only thing is that internal security wise, there are many such elements still existing which are rebel rousers. I think we need to do quite a bit on that. Yes, a lot is being done. A lot of things the government will not talk about and discreetly doing. But I think it will take a little more time, and we have to be a little patient on that.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.